Joel Hausser joins us in our studios this morning. A lot of people know Joel around town. He speaks at the county commission meetings. He is a beekeeper. He works with the rural resources, but wanted Joel to come by today, talk about bees and honey. Good morning, Joel.
Good morning, Ron.
I saw you. We saw each other downtown. I think last year there was a swarm of bees
at the courthouse.
At
yes,
the federal courthouse. They'd landed on a hive there, and I knew you've done it. And I've heard you speak about it before, but it's interesting to me. So I kept telling you, find a day and come by, and we'll talk about bees. So we're going to do that for a little bit this morning.
Let's go do it.
Let's talk about bees. So first off, I want to, you keep bees. How many hives do you have, and how much honey do you get?
My wife has, since we've retired here, has put me to a limit of under 20. So I had 18 last year, but unfortunately it was a bad year for honey bees all over the United States. Tennessee, we had about 80 to 90% hive loss this last year. So I'm down to 3 out of 18 this year.
As a layperson, when I say, hey, look there, it's a beehive, I picture some white boxes stacked up on cinder blocks. So is that a hive? Each one of those stacks is a hive.
That is the Langstroth type hive.
All right, and there can be how many levels to those hives? Some of them are taller than others.
Keep stacking that honey up on there.
All right, so when you look at that, what are you looking at? What makes up not the bee part of it, but the wood and screen and holes and box parts of a hive?
There's several different supers, as we call the individual boxes. You have the deep supers at the bottom of the hive. They're about 11 inches high. They are where we try to have the brood, the queen and the brood being reared down there. Then you stack 6 or 9 inch deep boxes on top of that with 10 frames in each one. And that's where the bees will put the excess honey, process the honey, and store that. And people just keep stacking those up all summer if they want. You
just don't want to get them so high they get top heavy or the wind could blow them over or anything else necessarily.
I've seen pictures of people with 14 of those on top, but that's not the brightest thing in the world.
So the whole idea there is for the bees to make and store honey. Everybody knows what honey is as far as seeing it on the store shelf, but what is honey as far as a bee is concerned?
The honey is like the nectar. It is the carbohydrate. Pollen is their proteins. Nectar is carbohydrates, sugars. And honey is the simplest sugars made. It's dehydrated down to just under 20%. Try to go about 14.5 to 18.5% moisture. And that's the honey, but it's got essential minerals and vitamins in it. All 21 amino acids can be found in the honey.
What do the bees use it for? Is it for snacking?
That's their food. That's their food.
So a bee, and I think people know, they go out to a flower and they collect the pollen and then they bring that back. And how does it get from pollen into honey?
Oh, you're going to get a classroom lecture. I'm sorry, Ron. The bees are generalists. They'll go to any flower that's got a nectar source, so it's good smelling. And they're attracted by that. They're also attracted by the shape of the flower. It's like a bullseye for them, so they go for it. But they go for the nectar is what they're really after. The pollen is a food supplement, is food for them.
Yeah.
But the nectar attracts them. As they're crawling all over trying to get to that little pot of nectar in the bottom, they get the pollen all over them, and that's how they pollinate. What an interesting name for pollen, right? They pollinate the flower, and then they fly to another flower. Each time a bee goes out to gather the nectar, they probably visit maybe 100 flowers before they fly back to the hive.
So the pollen is secondary as far as their diet is concerned. The main thing they're looking for is the nectar below that?
Nectar is probably driving, but the pollen is their protein. So they do bring that back. They bring that back, and they have those little pollen sacs on their hind legs that they bring in. It's interesting to watch them come in with yellow pollen. Red buds are starting out right now, so look for some deep purple on their back of their legs.
All right. Let's see. Let me get to that later. I'll write that down. Red buds. So yeah, everybody's seen bees that have great big yellow splotches on them from all the pollen. They get back and they convert that over to honey.
Well, they take the pollen and they store it, and they'll make bee bread out of that. They mix honey and pollen together. But got to back to the nectar. The bees take the nectar, put it in their honey stomachs. So actually they consume it, put it into a pouch, get back to the hive, and regurgitate it up to other bees. Sometimes their thoughts is the other bee eats the same pollen, the same nectar, but they take in their mandibles, the little pincers on the front of their face, and they stir that up. They mix that bee up with their enzymes from their stomach, their digestive juices. Then they put it up in top of the hive, and all that buzzing you hear are the bees fanning that nectar and turning it over a couple of times a day to get the moisture out. They get it down. When it's all ready, they put it into one of the comb, and they get enough in that, they cap it over, and that's how you make honey.
The honeycomb that you see in a jar or what you rob from, that's just a storage area.
That's storage, yes.
But there are combs down in the bottom of the hive where the babies are coming from.
They reuse that. Yes.
They reuse those.
They are constantly the first day a bee is, quote, born. In other words, it's gone through the egg, the larvae, and the pupa, and it chews its way out of the capping, the wax capping. It spends the first day cleaning that comb out where it was born.
All right.
And then it does the rest of the hive chores for the next 21 days.
You can't get my kids to clean their room, but
I've got somebody reminds me of my duties at home too.
So how much? This is a question that depends a lot on the size of the hive and how stacked up it is. But what do you expect to get? How much honey do you expect to get from a hive?
A lot of factors do that. In the winter, the bees get down into where we call a cluster in the hive, and if I grab both my hands and put them into a cup, that's 20,000 bees. They keep themselves warm. In the spring, as the pollen from the maple tree comes out, that stimulates the bees. They start building up the hive, and they go from 20,000 to 70,000 bees in a hive, in a good, healthy hive.
Yeah.
They go out and they look for the nectar sources, and right now I'll tell you the henbit and the dandelions are fantastic for them. And depending on how much food is out there is how much honey the bees can make. I was talking to Ray earlier, and we were talking about the buckwheat honey of central New York back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. There's 500,000 acres of buckwheat, and the bees were bringing in 300 to 400 pounds per hive of excess honey. Now, if we get 50 to 60 pounds of honey, we think we're doing great. But it's our last hive.
Okay. For a hive, 50 or 60.
Yes.
All right.
And that's loss of habitat. We keep planting grass, and it provides no food for our pollinators.